So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Before we get started and before I introduce myself, we've got an option for translation, right? So if you just click at the bottom of your screen and you'll have an option for whatever language you need translation for. So we've got English, Portuguese, and Spanish available for today's session. So if you can perhaps, do so as we get started. So once again, thank you so much for joining us. I think it's with huge gratitude that we are wanting to welcome you to the second of our series of webinars, Road to COP. And I see some familiar names here that were part of what was initiated in Colombia with a group of fellows end of last year. We are seeing this series as an opportunity to really kind of draw from people's expertise, experiences, in order to build knowledge, I think, internally within the Atlantic ecosystem, but also trying to strengthen networks externally as well. As you'll see, the speakers we've invited today all come from different contexts with such rich backgrounds. So really excited to both hear from them. And I think what was really exciting for us for today's session was an opportunity to center the people around some of these conversations. So today's topic, specifically looking at Indigenous and traditional knowledge in the context of the work of climate justice. I'm just going to wait for Klausia to come in before I get started with what we want to do for today's session. Klausia?
Só um minutinho, só acrescentando o que a Buzi disse, hoje a gente está com a tradução, né, como a Buzi falou, e aí eu gostaria de pedir que os palestrantes falem pausadamente, justamente para a gente fazer esse acompanhamento de uma forma melhor, né? E aí, só citando o nome dos palestrantes, caso alguém precise contactá-los, é o Fábio, na verdade ele é o técnico, aí tem a Bárbara, o Fabiano, que a Bárbara está fazendo tradução em inglês, Fabiano está fazendo a tradução em espanhol, e deixa eu ver se eu estou esquecendo o nome de alguém. Bárbara, Fabiano. E o Josué, também é o nosso outro tradutor, tá bom? Obrigada, Bilzy, desculpa interrompê-la.
Fantastic. Thanks, Klausia, and thanks for the reminder for keeping a slow pace as we speak. I think I'm one of those culprits. And just to say, in terms of the translation, this is part of our commitment to ensure that these platforms are accessible to a diverse group of people and for all of us to be able to be committed to the language justice component of our work. So with that, and I think just as we get started, a huge gratitude to the Procomom team that's hosting us, together with the Atlantic Institute that's also been part of co-convening today's session. We have 4 speakers today, also, as I said, just coming from incredible backgrounds. I'll introduce them each as they speak. But just to say so, we've got Sean, who will be coming in from Australia. So thanks for staying up for us. Sinegugu, who is based in South Africa. Vho Mphatheleni, also in South Africa. I'm not seeing Nichodimas at the moment, but we're meant to have a 4th speaker who will be able to share with us very soon. Klausia, I see another hand. Is it from previously or you wanting to come in again?
Esqueci de baixar. Desculpa.
Oh, to put it down. No worries, no worries. So huge welcome. And yeah, as I say, thank you for joining us. I'm seeing some names from some of the Atlantic Fellows as well. So huge gratitude for joining us. So just in terms of the lineup for today, we will have the speakers each share anything between 8 to 10 minutes each. At the end of all the speakers having an opportunity, we are moving into breakout rooms for about 15 minutes, right? It's not long, but just an opportunity for all of us to have some reflection time before we open up for Q&A, right? So I think some of you might know sometimes Q&A means it's those of us that are the first to jump in And sometimes there isn't a chance for everyone to have thought or processed before we open. So just in terms of what the breakdown for today's session might be. And with that, so there's a few things perhaps just to say. I know Sinegugu might be struggling with Wi-Fi where he is, so I'm tempted to start with him, even though we were meant to start with Vho Mphatheleni. So Sinegugu, if it's okay, let's start with you so that in case you drop off or anything happens.
Yes, no, that's good. I'm ready. Yes.
Fantastic.
Thank
So
you.
perhaps just by way of introduction, Sinegugu is the director of Save the Wild Coast in Xolobeni, a community in the Eastern Cape in South Africa. I feel like we talk about Sinegugu's work across the world because we're so proud of the work that is being done in Xolobeni. I think, yeah, you give us such courage around what's possible around the climate space. So huge gratitude for you joining us this morning. And the platform is yours, Sinegugu.
Thank you very much. May I request that whoever who's flighting my slides do so. Greetings to everyone from all over. Thanks for the opportunity to come and share what we're doing in this little corner of the world. And as I already mentioned, my name is Sinegugu Zukulu, and I come from an NGO called Sustaining the Wild Coast, SWC. And in terms of, I will start talking as the presentation is not coming through. But in terms of the work or the work streams that we are doing, is we're doing
Sinegugu, are you still with us?
I do believe he lost his connection.
Okay. Apologies for that. Yes, unfortunately, Sinegugu, where Sinegugu is, they do struggle with Wi-Fi. But if that's the case, perhaps we'll go back to the original. There's a suggestion that maybe Sinegugu can switch off his camera when he comes back on. In that case, I think we will start with Vho Mphatheleni, if that's okay. Vho Mphatheleni, welcome. Can you hear me? Oh, Sinegugu is back. Sinegugu, can you hear us?
Yes. Okay. Yes, I can hear you. I'm sorry. I got lost. Is the person who's supposed to flight my slides able to do so?
They were when you just dropped off, Sinegugu.
I will.
Okay.
Yeah, so they will put them
Okay.
back on.
I'm sorry.
So perhaps we'll
Okay.
switch off our cameras, and maybe you can switch off your camera as well. Just it might be easier on your
Okay.
bandwidth.
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Still saying, if you can move on to the second slide, please. In terms of the work stream or the work that we are doing, said we're doing work on agroecology, youth capacity building for custodianship, where we want the young people to be able to protect the land. Also work within the climate change, especially on the adaptation side, which includes agroecology, removal of alien invasive vegetation, the education and awareness, which is focused more on the younger people, farmers more around the climate change impact and how they can better protect their crops and their livestock. Also the IKA's mainstreaming, looking at indigenous knowledge system and how we can actually make sure that indigenous knowledge or the knowledge of local communities of indigenous people is used as a base or a foundation for all the interventions, in other words, in all the development work. So that's the work which is sitting with me in terms of how do we bring indigenous knowledge to conservation, to development, and all of that, in order to make sure that the knowledge of the people is not wasted and that knowledge is preserved and is passed on from the elders to the younger ones. The other work stream is ecotourism development, developing ecotourism that is owned, led, and benefiting directly the local people, the communities. Next slide, please. And next slide, please.
Klausia, are we able to move to the next slide?
Eu achei que estava passando aqui, desculpa.
Yes, but the next slide will be looking at how we work with young people. As already mentioned, we work with the young people in terms of we've got a network of young farmers. So we've found that young people are now do not see farming as an attractive career pathing or way to create employment for themselves. So we're doing lots of work to see them why farming, given the youth unemployment that we have in the country and also globally. So we're doing lots of work to get the young people to see the opportunities in farming. The capacity building for custodianship. The participatory video is where young people are using cell phones to make videos, video clips, films, where they interview the elders and are documenting that knowledge, whether it's for debate or it's about the activities, but young people using the technology to document knowledge which is used to trigger debates within the community. The other one, we also have started right now. I'm coming to you from our office, which what we call Amatiba Community Network, where we young people have started a social enterprise of developing or starting a Wi-Fi hotspot in order to make access to internet or data cheaper. In South Africa, data is very expensive. In order to make it possible for the local kids to be able to go onto the internet to apply, whether to universities, whether they're applying for jobs, even a place where they could make copies locally. So that's what Amatiba Community Network is all about. It's about bringing or closing the digital gap for the local community. We are 2 hours away from the nearest town. So such a service is very critical and is run by young people. We also, under the agroecology, we also starting small businesses for young people. These to mention a few, like hives. We've got more than 100 hives within the Amatiba, which are owned by young people who have paired them up. So there are many apiaries around where they have this. We're starting the agro processing. We're establishing nurseries for young people so that they are very much hands-on on the agriculture or farming value chain. So starting the agro processing in terms of looking at even things such as the other challenge we have, of course, is the local people relying on poor nutrition food from the grocery stores. So we're looking at the ancient crops. How do we revive the ancient grains and how do we process them? So teaching young people on how to take the simple traditional menu, traditional food crops and come up with cook the food, the menu in a way that would encourage the young people to eat like pumpkins, things such as pumpkins, which are very nutritious, but young people don't prefer to eat those things. So We are therefore coming with training young people on how to make shawarmas and all those things and pizzas, but using our local produce, making chips out of sweet potatoes, which is a local crop. So we're looking at all of that. It's all part of giving skills to younger people. The next slide, please. And the next slide is focusing on in terms of the indigenous knowledge, the challenges of climate change. We are, as the local people, we are impacted by climate change. Gracias, please, if you could move to the next slide. We are impacted by climate change. For instance, we have seen an increased coming of rainfall during what used to be the dry season. As a result, the farming is becoming very, very difficult. So we're talking of these frequent rain bombs or rainstorms, severe rainstorms that come and lead to flooding, washing away the topsoil. But as a result of that, you will find that, for instance, our bean season, which used to be from between February, March, the planting of beans. Now, this year we had heavy rainfall. This year, farmers have got no beans, and as a result, the bean prices in shops, they go up. And then, so farmers, that means the food security is weaker. We also find that the harvest, if the rains come in April, like this year it happened, now all people lose their harvest because the maize got rotten, it starts germinating whilst it's still being stored in the containers to dry. The livestock diseases are increasing. So we are seeing farmers spending more and more money to acquire vet medicines to cure their livestock, their poultry. Also, we are seeing an increase in the spread of alien invasive vegetation, which is leading to fires that end up burning people's houses. So the impact of climate change is there. We are living through it. And I would say the past 15 years, we've seen all of these changes devastating. Bridges get washed away, and the municipalities, they do not have maintenance budget to repair those bridges. It takes 3 to 4 years to repair a road that was washed away or a bridge that was washed away. As a result, you find that communication and the traveling and all that becomes very difficult. So all of these, this is the particular impact that we see. The next slide, please. And then in the next slide, yes, if you're looking at the local people and how COPs and the indigenous people, in local communities like ours, people do not really know about these conference of parties. Because again, they don't participate. They don't know about those because no awareness actually gets done to the local people about those. In order for the local people to be able to participate, it needs funding resources. It's quite expensive, even if they wanted to travel to participate in those global protest days. And also even our local national negotiating teams, they don't really bother to look into the views of those local people. So the views of are not really considered. The last slide, please. Yeah. So, and then my last slide is looking at what's possible. What can we do in order to enhance the participation? I think one is taking messages, whether it's video clips, messages from local communities. It's also about how enabling their participation. That means having financial resources in order for people to travel, accommodation kit, to be able to attend, to participate in those. But also ensuring the indigenous people's messages are included in the negotiations, to say those messages if we could have national, regional, and international mobilization where the messages of local and indigenous peoples taken to the negotiation table, this could be done through video clips of elders passing those particular messages. So there's the whole lot that is possible. Even mere posters that could be made, that could be taken so that as part of the march they are there. I think I should stop there. I must have gone over time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sinegugu. And anyone who's listened to Sinegugu before, the fact that we were able to cap you at 10 minutes, huge gratitude for being able to be concise and still share so much. Hope your line can still hold, right? So we'd love to have you as part of Q&A, but just really glad we were able to hear parts of that. And with that, perhaps just to be able to have a little bit of diversity, right? So we've got overrepresentation in South Africa at the moment. So we'll have our next speaker, Sean, who's coming in from Sydney. So perhaps just a quick intro in terms of Sean. So Sean Appoo is a project manager at the Aboriginal Carbon Foundation and Indigenous leader, and who's based in Sydney, Australia. Sean, thank you so much for agreeing. I think Sean got a message from one of our fellows, and within an hour, I had gotten confirmation. So huge gratitude for wanting to journey with us on this, and welcome.
No, thank you, Brucey. I'm really honoured to be able to share some of our stories about what we're dealing with here in Australia at the moment, and yeah, very interested to listen to what Sinegugu had to say. There's lots of similarities to some of the things that we're dealing with here. So I'm a descendant of the Kabi and Birri people in Australia. They're two different Indigenous nations, two of over 300. Just to give you a bit of context, I'll just share my screen quickly for those who can see it, so that you can I can show you a map that gives a bit of information around all of the different Aboriginal nations. So let me get out of that. So this map, if you can see it, is a very colourful map, and it gives a bit of detail around the number and size and scale of the various Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander nations across Australia. There were over 300 discrete Aboriginal nations across Australia, over 500 different dialects across those nations. Lots of collaboration between neighbours so that they could jointly manage resources. So if you think of river systems that come from up here in Queensland, the rains up here in Queensland wash all the way down through the centre of the country and come down here to South Australia, or they go over here through the Victoria-New South Wales border. So when the rains came, or when the environment was letting people know that it was rain time, you know, lots of conversations would go on between neighbours in particular areas to be able to plan for how they were going to manage and share their resources. So when you consider how long these systems have been developed for, so you know, at the moment the accepted age of Indigenous cultures in Australia is 65,000 years, and as science gets better, that time frame keeps getting longer and longer and longer. And there's a few different stories around the country that Indigenous people's occupation of this country dates back to around 125,000 years. There's some research going on down in the southern parts of the country around a couple of different sites to verify those kinds of timeframes and those kinds of claims around a couple of specific sites. So, like all Indigenous people around the globe, you know, we've spent a lot of time on our country, and we've learnt from our country, and we've collected all of that knowledge into various different vessels, depending on what we need from country at any one particular time. At the moment, since European colonisation here, which has happened for roughly 230 years, we observe the European calendars of 4 seasons, and we've got the European calendar of 365 days in a year, and we've moved away from that seasonal calendar where you weren't talking about years, you were talking around cycles of seasons to be able to determine someone's age or the passing of time. And in that seasonal calendar, we were told by the environment like what was happening. So you spent time when you're doing your duties throughout the day observing country, and country would tell you what was going to be happening soon. So various flowers will be flowering, or animals will be in certain positions, or the temperature might be high, or winds might be prevalent from a particular direction. And all of that information was processed to be able to let you know what seasonal or what season you were in, to determine what kind of activities had to take place during that time. So as I said, this knowledge was generated over thousands and thousands of years and passed down orally. So just through spoken word and songs, to be able to keep that knowledge fresh and to also pass it on to other people. So since colonisation, a lot of our languages have been fractured, and a lot of work at the moment is going on to try and put a lot of that language back together, because contained in that language is a lot of scientific knowledge that is needed now by various Indigenous peoples around the country to be able to implement programs and projects that are going to mitigate against climate change, but also to help support and maintain biodiversity. Australia has had nearly 20 years of environmental commodities markets like carbon. And for the last 15 years, we've seen a lot of involvement by Indigenous people in carbon markets. But so far, their involvement has been limited to 2 rainfall bands across the top of the country. And the methodology that a lot of these projects are using to generate carbon credits is based on traditional Indigenous knowledge in those places as well. So it was easy for a lot of Indigenous people in those areas to get involved in that carbon project or those kinds of carbon projects. But in lots of the rest of the country, it's been much, much harder, because a lot of the carbon methods have been written for farmers, and some of those methods take a lot of investment to get up and running, and a lot of Indigenous people in different parts of the country are very land rich and cash poor, and they aren't able to use their land as assets to borrow against, for instance, as well. So there's a lot of structural barriers in place that have been holding Indigenous people back from getting involved in a lot of environmental markets. There are some new environmental commodities that are coming onto the market. One's around biodiversity, so it's called the nature repair market, and that legislation went through our federal parliament last year, so that market is now coming online. But we're finding that a lot of Indigenous groups need support to be able to push back on some of the different methodology metrics that the government wants to collect through those programs, because they're very scared that a lot of their traditional Indigenous knowledge and intellectual property will be stolen through getting involved in some of these programs as well. So we're trying to work with Indigenous groups to upskill them around data sovereignty, to make sure that they're able to maintain their own data for themselves and not have it stolen, as has happened in any number of different ways across the country as well. But what we've seen with climate change, as Sinegugu said, we're getting lots of disruptions in those weather cycles that we'd seen for thousands and thousands of years. we're having lots of the rain bombs. We're having massive floods in particular areas. We've had a lot of years of floods, which means that we haven't been able to do a lot of bushfire mitigation work. So as we get closer and closer, as we get further and further away from a big bushfire event without having done the work to prevent another, that probably means we're getting closer and closer to another big bushfire event. I don't know if you know, but just prior to COVID, we had the largest bushfire event in the country's history. It ran for 6 weeks across the southeastern corner of the country, and cost the insurance industry more than $5.5 billion to pay out insurance policyholders. So a ridiculous amount of damage was done. Millions and millions of hectares of country was burnt, and over 3 billion animals and birds perished in that fire. So a lot of the work we're doing is talking with insurance companies to say, we need to start thinking in a sort of public health model where prevention is much cheaper and much better than cure. So we're talking with them around how Indigenous knowledges can feed into risk reduction and bushfire mitigation. And we're just starting to get some traction with insurance companies at the moment. And we're running a big forum next month that's going to bring together insurance companies, cultural fire practitioners, and researchers, as well as some politicians, to talk about what our solutions might be, and hopefully we'll get some commitment from all of those stakeholders to implement some pilot projects that are sort of paralleled with research, so that we can collect the data that talks about the effectiveness of these kinds of programs. So there's a lot that we're trying to do here in Australia. We learn a lot from our overseas Indigenous brothers and sisters when it comes to COP. I haven't been to COP myself personally, but there's a possibility that I may be able to go to Brazil later on this year. But if I don't get to go to Brazil, then I think our government is angling to have the next COP co-hosted between Australia and the Pacific Islands. So there will be a lot of work that will go on in the next 18 months before COP31 to make sure that we can provide space and a voice and a platform for Indigenous voices. I'll stop there if you like, Busi, to give us some time.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, John. So excited, even just as I listen to you kind of repeat some of the stuff that Sinegugu has said, this idea that people already have the solutions, right? It's a question of how do we amplify, how do we connect, and really excited at how this conversation can also just support some of that. And with that, we will have our next speaker and perhaps our last speaker, because I can't seem to find Nichodimas. We have Vho Mphatheleni who will be joining us. Vho Mphatheleni, welcome. So Vho Mphatheleni Makaulule is based in Venda in South Africa, someone that I've heard speak a number of times and always so inspired by. So Vho Mphatheleni is the founder of Mupo Foundation, so Dzomo la Mupo, which is rooted in the protection of Zwifho, which is the sacred indigenous forest. Her work is around food systems and looking at spaces for intergenerational learning. It's with huge gratitude that I'm welcoming you, and so glad to be able to get your input. So welcome.
Good morning, everyone. I am on the road now, traveling to the highest, richest biodiversity area in Venda, in Vembe, in Limpopo, which also nourish Kruger National Park. I'm just on the road, but I create time for this space. I am coming from Venda, Venda is found in the Limpopo province and now is called the Vembe district. Venda is the richest biodiversity area where we have the Zoutpansberg ranges. In these Zoutpansberg ranges, there is the richest biodiversity habitat. But since the other way of thinking impose, we see that impose when we go back to the indigenous knowledge, because it was never agreement or consultation in an ethical or proper way for the people who are created and originated there. And the people of Venda, we live according to the indigenous ways. And our indigenous ways are rooted in this biodiversity. When we see the biodiversity area, we are also part of it. We are also in it. We are also biodiversity. Because the Bavenda people, our spirituality is rooted on that biodiversity. We are the people whom originated with no other space for our prayers, our connection, our well-being. Only the sacred sites, which are called Zwifho. But when we come to the climate justice, we see that still there is no justice in trying to mitigate or make the people to adapt with climate change if indigenous knowledge is sidelined. That's the reason we are having our organization called Dzomo la Mupo. Dzomo la Mupo, we translate, is the voice of the creation of nature, voice of mountains, voice of plants, voice of insects, voice of human beings, voice of animals. Because we are all multi-species according to indigenous understanding. There's not that there is nature and there is human being. Indigenous knowledge, we are all multi-species in the same habitat. We say that climate change is not putting attention in a good way, because when we say climate justice, for us, the Bavenda people, is when sacred sites are left as they are, as the ancestors have left this sacred site as they are. Even though Venda, we have the previous government of homelands, but sacred sites were not touched. They were respected because they are the potency of bringing the well-being. We get the democracy. This is where we feel that climate justice is not solved or given attention, even though we go to this big gathering of COP. If indigenous understanding is not well given an attention. After democracy, we saw that there is no justice on indigenous lands. While before democracy, those places were left as they are, not touched. After democracy, where the democracy is also talking about climate change, climate justice, mitigate, do what. But our government is still authorizing the mining in these remaining indigenous biodiversity areas. We don't see the climate justice, even though people are going there to COP many years. I started to learn about COP by COP 17. But still today we are trying up and down to say there will be the calm on the climate if the forest is left as it is, because it's the habitat, including the rain. As I said, I'm traveling to Chidzibe, highest biodiversity. We have Lake Funduzi, it's known. We have Tata Forest, it's known. It's the beginning of the rivers. It's the rain catchment area. But if there is authorization that you have to mine that area, are we in the climate justice? Today we are faced with a huge thing which we are scared that those not yet born, it's better to tell them don't allow the mothers to give birth to you. We have this huge thing, special economic zone. Presently sitting here, we are fighting with them. They want to erode 3,000 hectares land where there are very, very old trees called baobab, sacred trees. From the big baobab, one baobab to another baobab, there is a big biodiversity area of many, many things. But they want to erode more than 100,000 baobabs. Is this climate justice? In the attention of those who gather many times and talk about climate change, COP20, COP2018, COP what, now they brought the word climate justice. We still feel that there is no climate justice. It's just gathering for talking, but if we do not implement this, it is a collapse for forever. It is a collapse for those who yet not born. We don't know where are they going to breathe? Where are they going to get water? In which climate will they live healthy? Are they going to have another technology where they will solve this collapse after this mining still continue? This is what I can say. What we are doing in Dzomo la Mupo is to try all means, firstly, to limit and stop this mining is enough. We can have other means of getting energy. And if we talk about food security, how can we talk about food security if all the water is going to the mining, to this special economic zone, to this all?
I hope we didn't lose Vho Mphatheleni because she was just on fire. Vho Mphatheleni, can you still hear us? Okay, in case she has dropped off, hopefully when she logs back on in the Q&A, if there's anything else we've missed, we might invite her to add on. Thank you so much. If you are hearing us from Mphatheleni, I think, yeah, you are speaking probably a lot of the things that we are wanting to address as we have these conversations. So on the pulse, and I'm hoping when you come back, you can also just share about the ritual that will be taking place from Thursday. Because, yeah, so as much as there are so many challenges, I think the space that Vho Mphatheleni is at is also a sign of some of the seeds for solutions that we are looking for. With that, our fourth speaker also didn't manage to get on. So I think we will move into the breakout groups, right? So just again, huge gratitude to Vho Mphatheleni and the two other speakers. So for the breakout groups, we are wanting for you to just we'll have 15 minutes in the breakout groups. And it's an opportunity, as I said, sometimes we come on these webinars and not everyone has an opportunity to be able to share or have a conversation around some of what's coming up. So I'm putting the questions in the chat for the breakout. When you move into the breakout, hopefully there's about 4 of you in the breakout, hopefully not too many. And it's an opportunity just to introduce yourselves. So if you can share your name, I've put that in the chat, please look at that. Share your name, where you're located, the organization or network or the kind of work that you're doing. And then, yeah, anything in terms of just the conversation today, any insights that are coming up for you, any inspiration as you listen to our speakers. I know, even the speakers that I've probably heard before, there's already things that are percolating for me. Any inspiration? What are some of the gaps as we have these conversations? And what are possibilities are emerging as we start some of these conversations as well? hopefully there's diverse people in the group, but if it is some of your besties, hopefully you catch up, but still cover some of the questions. You don't need to cover everything, cover what you can. You only have 15 minutes, and we'll return and then be able to open up for reflections and any questions to our speakers as well. So with that, can I double check for anyone who is organizing the breakouts? I'm not sure if it's Fabio or if it's Klaus. Yeah, can I check if we're ready for the breakouts?
Yeah, I'm ready. Just to confirm, it will be 4 breakout rooms with 4 or 5 people each, right?
Fantastic. Yeah, that's correct. And they
Okay.
have 15 minutes. So if we can be back here at 5 past whatever your time is.
Okay, that's fine. Just start.
Fantastic.
Starting right now. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, everybody. See you after your breakouts. Welcome back, Vho Mphatheleni. It looks like you dropped off earlier. Apologies, we moved into breakout groups. So they'll be back in about a minute. And if there's anything that you still needed to add, we'll give you time at the end if that's okay.
Okay, may I stop the breakout room right now?
Yes, please. Thanks, Fabio.
No worries. Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, they will start coming back in about 30 seconds.
Fantastic. Thank you. Great. Welcome back, everyone. So good to see some faces as they switch off their cameras. Fantastic. So we'd love to hear just any reflections from either the breakout rooms or questions that people might have specifically to our speakers. So let's open up. Anyone want to kick us off with any reflections? Again, it can be from your breakout group or a question that you might have. So perhaps, yeah, yeah, please go ahead. So is someone coming in?
Yep, this is Brenda. If I don't,
Yes, please,
I
Brenda.
was so
please come in.
excited. Yep, I was with Sine. I hope I said
Great.
okay. And okay. You know, we got on this conversation about grassroots efforts, and because something he said in his talk really stuck out to me, and that was indigenous knowledge. And I was, and we live on totally opposite ends of the world, right? And how similar things are with and the challenges are with preserving indigenous knowledge. So we talked about that a bit, and we talked about how to preserve that and what are the barriers to it. And one of the things we talked about is big business and how they have an impact on everything that we consume. They're also a big contributor to climate change, let's face it. And what we can do at where we are to mitigate their impact on us. So we were talking about how to leverage the capacity that we have in our communities to do that. So that was, yeah, that's how far we got. But I think it was about leveraging what we have and also how to harness our collective power. I don't think we put it like that when we were talking, but that's what I'm thinking now, how to harness our power to fight climate change. Thank you.
So much, Brenda. Thank you for kicking us off. And just even in your statement around that's how far we got, right? We see these conversations as iterative, right? So it's one piece of the conversation, and hopefully either pass it on to a next group that's having the conversation, or hopefully you connected as well now with Sinegugu, if that's the case as well. So thank you so much for those reflections.
He may not know it, but I did.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Nangomso, please come in. So we'll take a few comments, and if there's questions, then we'll direct those to the speakers once we've heard from a few people. Nangomso.
Hi, Wusi. Firstly, thank you to you and your team for just curating such a reviving and informative space for us to connect. Thank you very much. So I was in a group shortly with Eleanor, an Afro fellow from Sierra Leone, who's about to graduate or just graduated. Congratulations, Eleanor, and welcome. And also Tendai, an Afesa from South Africa. So as Brenda was saying, for us, it felt as if, you know, we had connected prior to being grouped together, because Tendai is a trained social worker who uses Indigenous knowledge systems, right, in addressing mental health issues. I mean, she speaks about how, you know, through healing and connecting with the land, the people, the culture, and how we use our Indigenous knowledge systems to disrupt the violence that continues to be perpetuated by the system on Black bodies. And Eleanor is a trained lawyer, you know, focusing on land rights, and she was sharing with us how they are using the law, right, to navigate a way of also disrupting the system that has been perpetuated by the corporate and private sector that Brenda was just making reference to. You know, as far back on the African continent, to be specific, as far back as King Leopold years, you know, as far back as how especially the West African community was enslaved, and how you know, using Black bodies, using violence to ensure that corporate you know, is enabled, and how that was the beginning of the disruption on our climate. And so when we speak about these Indigenous knowledge systems, we speak about things our great-grandfathers knew, and it's a matter of claiming back our knowledge through our language, through system, through collective action, like we are doing now and moving forward. And how all of us are interconnected, right? We are in the food sovereignty space, and we're using that to address food insecurity in our communities. Because where I come from, we know that 1 in every 3 kids, right, is being challenged with malnutrition. But then how do we, as Sinegugu was speaking about, for instance, beans, we could not produce beans this year because of the climate change crisis, because we've got so much rain we've never had before. But then what does history through Indigenous knowledge system tells us, right, about planting beans? Because the information is there when we have too much rain, to be more simplistic. So yeah, it was great. Little time, but thank you.
Yeah, and hopefully it's one piece of the conversation, Nangomso, right? And more to follow. But thank you so much for those reflections. And as you're saying, in different locations, but similar struggles. And hopefully these conversations are starting to knit the kind of knowledge and support and strength and inspiration that we're needing to be able to push this work forward. Can I check, is there another group that wants to just offer any reflections from your conversation, or a specific question you might have for any of the speakers? Barbara, I see you've unmuted. Did you want to come in? Okay, maybe not. Maybe I misunderstood that. Great. Any questions for any of our speakers? Okay, while we wait for questions, feel free to write any in the chat as well. Sean, the one part that I know when we initially spoke that I was so inspired by, I was just listening to your referencing a partnership that you have with another Indigenous community. I think you referenced a community in Canada. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that? Because, yeah, so just even in this conversation, right? So listening to people talk about what's happening, right? Brenda, I'm assuming it might be the US that you're speaking from or somewhere else. Nangom, so when you talk about what's happening in a South African context or what might be happening in Sierra Leone, but these kind of nodes of knowledge that we might be able to learn from each other. So, and what I liked of what you were saying, Sean, around being intentional around learning from each other is going to be so important. Would you mind sharing a little bit of that, Sean, while we wait to see if there's any questions in the chat?
Yeah, I think part of the discussion that we're having here is that the Western ideology around fire use and the Indigenous ideology is very different. We have different histories around fire use, and one is very fear-based. The Western ideology is quite fear-based, and the Indigenous ideology sees fire as a tool to be used for a range of different purposes. So we had some Métis people from Canada. So Métis people they're recognised as Indigenous people, but they are descendants of Indigenous women and French fur trappers. So they've been granted their own lands, and they want to learn about. So obviously, fire is a big issue for them because they are not allowed to use their own cultural fire practice, and they've learned that in Australia we use cultural fire practice to earn carbon credits. So we've been talking with them since might have been COP28 in Dubai. We've been talking with them since then about how the methodology was developed here, what was the science that went into developing that methodology, and then the development of the market around buying the carbon credits, and how can we value add to these Indigenous products? Like how can we not have these carbon credits lost with all the other carbon credits? How do we add our own story to those carbon credits as well, so that we get that extra value for them? So we've been talking with them for a couple of years since COP28. They came over to Australia earlier this year, and we helped put together a bit of a study tour for them. So they met some government people to talk about method development. We introduced them to some market people, so they learnt a little bit around setting up their own local markets and the different elements of that. And we brought them up to Queensland to one of our projects as well. So they got to see cultural fire practice being used in the landscape at that scale, and they got to hear from some of the Indigenous people, the local Indigenous people who were implementing that project, and to learn from them some of the social and cultural impacts that have come from it.
Amazing. Thank you. Thanks for that, Sean. And part of why I thought it's so useful to hear a bit more about that, for me, when we talk about big systems like colonialism and just industry, those are coordinated efforts. So in the same way that we are wanting to push back, actually we will require coordinated action in terms of just learning from each other, building on each other's knowledge and practices as we move forward. Eleanor, please come in.
Thank you, Busi. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, everyone who has contributed to the discussion thus far. Just picking up on where Sean left off, and the readouts from the breakout groups. In Sierra Leone, carbon trading is rather a new and emerging like corporate industry, but it's not well regulated at the moment, and that's very much open for exploitation, particularly of local communities, and that's essentially what we have started seeing. Lack of community engagement, and so it's very much sort of it's opaque, but also there isn't that process that was just discussed about what can we learn from those who actually own the land, those who own or have been living in and with the mangroves for generations, about how to tend, how to care for the environment, how to care for the land, and how to maximize, and then what they will benefit. So it's usually a negotiation, hardly actually a negotiation, but usually, we're going to come in and we're going to pay you what amounts to a pittance, as rent or compensation for this land, not knowing that the corporate entity, who's usually a foreign entity, is making millions off of the carbon credits and or other activities on the land. And so, indeed, I agree completely about the fact that these are systems, and so we also need to organize ourselves. And that's why my project actually for AFRI is the creation of a global interactive platform through which we can not only get more insights, which we'll be able to showcase from different parts of the world, starting in Sierra Leone, but in different parts of the world eventually, these activities or these types of things that are happening, but more importantly, where people can connect with one another, communities are able to connect with one another, practitioners, activists or academics are able to gain knowledge from how communities have traditionally engaged with the land, the values that they have around the land, but also how we're pushing back against these systems.
Thank you.
So
Thanks, Eleanor.
happy to connect with anyone on that later on.
That's fantastic. Hopefully, yeah. So I know not all of us are Atlantic Fellows. So if someone is happy to maybe drop your email or contact in the chat, please do so. But yeah, I think for the rest of us, if there are other ways to do kind of direct contact, please do so. Before I move on to Brenda, I think just a few things out of what you're sharing, Eleanor, right? So there's something for me around constantly asking ourselves the question of, in the solutions we're finding, how do we make sure we're not reproducing the same oppressive systems that we're trying to address, right? And I think this kind of work requires that kind of reflection for all of us at all times. And part of these conversations can be part of kind of keeping checks and balances around that. And then there is something for me around how can then we be proactive in setting up some of those best practices around ways Indigenous communities can benefit, interact in ways where the power can shift. And I think hopefully that just the example that Sean is offering can be one of those things that we say, these might be some of the things to kind of note when engaging around some of these topics. Thank you so much. And let's move on to Brenda. We've got about 8 more minutes. We'll take Brenda. And I did want to see if our speakers have any last comments before we close. Brenda, please come in.
Oh, thank you. I think you just summed what I was just thinking. There has been a systematic approach to how these systems were set up, and it's going to take a systematic shift to combat, and I hate to use such a violent word, I'm sorry, to combat those systems. And it has to be intentional. And when we're talking about, I think, collecting the knowledge and understanding what that is and what that means and how it works still to this day, and how to leverage that, and then how to bring in a diverse group of folks to work on those issues. That's where I would need help with that work personally. Yeah. This type of networking and talking, I think, is helpful. If we can keep this going, that'd be great.
Thank you so much, Brenda. This is a series of 6 webinars. So just to say, this was webinar 2 of 6. So there'll be 4 more that follow after this. So it is the beginning of, or kind of continuation of more conversations to continue. So please invite other friends. I am blown away by people who've attended, I think from the US, you might be like, I think it's 5 a.m. wherever you are. So just huge gratitude for being part of the conversation. So I'm going to let our speakers have the last 6 minutes as we wrap up. And Sinegugu, you know, I think speak about whatever you want to speak. But the thing I'm also, you know, especially because the kind of industry part keeps coming up. And I think the fight that you've shown in Xolobeni, right, as a community, is such an example of what's possible when a community comes together. So for me, perhaps just a question around when facing big systems that have power, right, substantive power, where do you draw strength from? What keeps you inspired? And yeah, what's created some cohesion in that community that's allowed you to get to this point? So Sean and Sinegugu, please share what you can in just your closing statements.
All right. Thank you very much, Busi. Yeah, my signal is getting really bad now. I hope you'll be able to hear me. I think the amazing thing about the indigenous people and local communities, wherever they are, is the fact that they fight because their life is dependent on it. So the biggest inspiration, for instance, in Bonderland, many people over decades have died protecting the land. That is an inspiration enough. But it's also, you fight because it is the right thing to do. I think knowing that your future depends on the land or natural resources is a good motivation enough. I think it is important to mention that globally, if you're looking at all the indigenous people's territory, whether you look at the Amazonia, you look at the Congo Basin in Africa, you look at the Southeast Asia, the Philippines, all of those territories, they are the lungs of the earth when it comes to absorption of carbon dioxide, which relates to climate change. But also those areas, they are the world producers of water for humankind. Remember, when I say water, I'm not talking only about the water in the rivers. There is underground water. There is also water in the air that drifts with the currents in the sky, giving water to other countries where the clouds drift and then they fall as rainfall. So those indigenous territories, they also harboring about 80% of all the biodiversity globally. So therefore, when indigenous people fight, they don't even know the term activism, but they're doing it because their lives dependent on it. When we fought against Shell in South Africa, against Shell wanted to do oil and gas exploration, we were fighting because the ocean is sacred. Our livelihood come from the ocean, our spirituality. So these things, the fighting, like you listen to Mphatheleni, they are fighting because they know their lives is dependent on the biodiversity, on the land, on the water. And this is something that it is important. Whilst the global north continues to allow these oil giants and multinational corporations to go and explore for more oil and gas, despite the climate change impact that we are seeing. And we need the global north to rise up, to stand against those what you call the people, the beneficiaries, those shareholders of those big companies who continue to looking for profit to come to their pockets, despite the fact that they are threatening the very life of the planet and the life of everyone. So indigenous people fight not just for themselves, but also for everyone, because everyone needs those indigenous people's territories. So it's not a selfish one. It is something that we all need to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, with such passion. And we are grateful for the fight as we benefit from it. Sean, you get the last word.
Oh, how can I follow that? So much passion and such really really wise words. I guess I'll leave us with a bit of positivity maybe. everyone who I've spoken with here tonight and who I've listened to here tonight are very intelligent people and very passionate and doing great work in their communities. In our group, we sort of spoke a lot about advocacy and how that can be a very difficult road. And I guess, you know, because everyone here is so passionate and motivated, you know, we're all up for that fight. But, you know, don't forget to stop every now and again and take a little look backwards and see how far we've come in each of these battles. Even if just to give yourself a little bit of strength for the next battle that's coming up. You know, when I look back and see what's happened here and what's happened globally, there is a lot of resistance. There is a lot of innovation in our thinking about how we're going to change these arguments to incorporate different messages and different points of view, even down to using, you know, financial tools to be able to help us in our battles. So, you know, don't forget to stop and take a breath and have a look behind you and see how far you've come in your battle. If it just to give you a little bit of strength to keep going.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Sean. Thank you to all our speakers. I see Vho Mphatheleni didn't manage to come back again, but sending her just, blessings and strengths. As I said, this week they have a ritual that they're doing in Limpopo in Venda to Sinegugu and all the people of Xolobeni. Just huge gratitude. And Sean, thank you so much for a quick response and the knowledge that you've shared with us today. Again, just huge gratitude to the Brockamom team that's helped in terms of just the infrastructure of allowing the space.
I'd like to say just a word.
Yes, Klausia, do you want to come in?
É muito rápido, vou falar em português, contando com a tradução. A gente está sempre tentando melhorar nossos encontros, e aí, para isso, a gente vai distribuir um form, a gente vai enviar por e-mail para vocês um form, para que vocês avaliem como foi esse encontro, tá bom?
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Klausia. In case you hadn't clicked on your English translation or English to Portuguese, Klausia is requesting for us to fill in the form that just allows us to be able to improve these webinars. So please just check out in the chat there, and if you can click on the form and give us any feedback. Again, thank you so much for those who've attended. I know just the different time zones that people are calling in from. And these conversations are always so nourishing. So huge gratitude for people's time. Look forward to see you for the next webinar. I think the dates might be out already, so please look out for those. As I said, this was webinar 2 of a series of 6. So webinar 3 will be coming up soon. Thank you, and I hope to see you. Please, if you are joining us for the next one, please grab a friend or two to join us to make the circle bigger, as the South Africans would say. Wishing you well for the rest of your day, wherever you're calling in from, or your evening. In Sean's case, I think it might be already bedtime soon. And Sinegugu, so glad your internet was able to hold. Thanks, everybody. If you are needing anything, I'm going to stay on for the next few minutes if you want to drop a question or anything as we end the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Brucey. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Sinegugu. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Busi, I feel like we have previously met. I don't know why. It seemed very familiar to me. I'm wondering, I'm trying to...
Which cohort of AFRI are you?
This most recent one, 2024 to 20... Yeah.
Then were you in Johannesburg for...
in February this year?
Then we would have met at Sanctuary Mandela.
Ah, okay. All right. She looks very familiar to me.
I did meet a lot of people, so I'm not remembering
Yes.
everyone. And you didn't, there's no photo, so I'm not sure if,
yeah,
but if you're saying...
sorry, let me just put my video on. But yes, but
Yes.
same, yes, I'll meet a lot of people. And I also was wondering if we hadn't even met before that. I used to work with OSF.
Maybe in my other life. So OSF feels like in my kind of HIV/AIDS life a while back. And then the past kind of 10 years, I was doing kind of diversity, equity, and inclusion work, or in South Africa, transformation work.
Okay. Anyway, in any case, I think at least we know in February we probably met.
Yeah, it's probably February.
But anyway, I don't want to monopolize the time. Thank you for leading this wonderful discussion. And I've just taken the time to try to get people's contacts to connect with them.
Fantastic. Yeah, I've also saved your email here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, thanks. Take care, bye.
Thanks everybody. Bye. And to the Procomum team, yeah, I can't say thank you enough, right? So just so grateful for the quick responsiveness when we were sending things around. And yeah, hopefully people got some benefit from today. And our translators.
It works. Bye.
Yeah, great. Thanks everybody. Wishing you a great day.
Tchau, Buzi. Bye, bye.
Bye.
Galera da tradução, muito obrigada.
Obrigado. Bom dia, gente. Até a próxima.
Bom dia, até a próxima, gente. Valeu.